By the summer of 1945, Allied bombing and the final Soviet artillery assault had reduced Berlin to roughly 400 million cubic meters of rubble. Its population had fallen from 4.3 million to 2.8 million. The city was physically shattered, and politically it was split into 4 Allied occupation zones, despite sitting exactly 100 miles deep inside Soviet-controlled Eastern Germany. The national currency, the Reichsmark, had completely collapsed. Years of massive wartime spending by the Nazi government had debased it, and post-war Soviet authorities accelerated the inflation by excessively printing their own supply of the notes. Paper money lost its purchasing power. Citizens reverted to a black market barter system. Germans began using American cigarettes as the primary medium of exchange. A single pack could buy a day's food. A carton could hire a skilled laborer. You cannot finance factories or pay municipal workers with tobacco. The lack of a functioning currency halted any chance of industrial recovery. The German population was starving, they were freezing, and entirely reliant on outside powers, giving the surrounding Soviet military immense leverage over the isolated capital. The United States responded with the Marshall Plan. The Marshall Plan was a massive American economic aid program designed to rebuild Western European economies and halt the political spread of communism. Washington knew a strong Allied Germany was required to anchor the region, but the aid hit an immediate logistical wall. You cannot distribute billions of dollars of industrial equipment into an economy running on barter. Rebuilding required a stable, trusted paper currency. Introducing a new currency into the jointly occupied country carried massive risks. The Soviet Union demanded that only their currency circulate in Berlin. If the Western Allies minted their own capitalist tender, the Soviet leadership would view it as a rogue action designed to undermine their authority and lock Germany into the Western orbit. The United States, Britain, and France decided to print the money anyway. They chose to rebuild the West German economy, fully aware that doing so would trigger a direct geopolitical confrontation with Moscow. In a highly classified operation, the Western Allies transported 250 million newly printed bells, the Deutschmark, into their occupation zones, including West Berlin. On June 18, 1948, they announced the new currency would become legal tender in 3 days. The economic effect was instantaneous. Because the new money was strictly capped in supply and backed by Western economic guarantees, people trusted it. Hoarded food, consumer goods, and raw materials suddenly appeared in shop windows. The cigarette-backed black market evaporated overnight. The Soviet administration panicked. They immediately banned the Deutschmark in their sector, announced their own competing currency called the Ostmark, and demanded the West withdraw their money from Berlin entirely. The military occupation had fractured. 2 entirely incompatible economic systems were now actively fighting for dominance in a single city, and the battle lines were drawn right in the local shop windows. The Western Allies refused to pull the Deutschmark. In response, Joseph Stalin decided to physically squeeze the city until they capitulated. On June 24, Soviet troops severed all access points between West Germany and West Berlin. They halted passenger trains, blocked freight shipments on the Autobahn, and suspended all canal barge traffic. This map shows the exact geographical trap. Because West Berlin sits deep inside Soviet-controlled East Germany, cutting supply routes completely isolated the western sectors, choking off food and coal. The West had to choose: abandon their new currency or watch 2 million civilians starve. The Soviet Union lacked the economic leverage to outcompete the Deutsche Mark in the open market. They weaponized geography to enact a physical siege instead. The Soviets blocked the roads, rails, and rivers. But the 1945 written agreement defining the occupation included one loophole: 3 legally guaranteed 20-mile-wide air corridors connecting West Germany to Berlin. The Western Allies bypassed the ground siege entirely. They launched the Berlin Airlift, initiating a relentless aerial supply chain to keep the city alive. The logistical scale was staggering. American and British crews flew over 278,000 flights. At the operation's peak in April 1949, one cargo plane landed in West Berlin in 30 seconds, delivering nearly 13,000 tons of coal and food in a single day. Inside the city, West Berliners survived on strictly rationed food and limited electricity. Yet they overwhelmingly rejected Soviet offers of extra rations. The visible commitment of the airlift forged a deep, lasting political unity between the German citizens and the Allied powers. The relentless industrial capacity of the West completely humiliated the Soviet leadership. Stalin's attempt to hold a city hostage had been inverted into a massive global propaganda defeat. On May 12, 1949, realizing the physical blockade had failed to stop the economic integration of the West, the Soviets quietly reopened the roads and railways. The political damage, however, was irreversible. The crisis over the currency formalized the physical and ideological division of the nation into two distinct states, East and West Germany. The threat of the blockade also forced the Western Allies to organize a permanent defense. It accelerated the creation of NATO, a military alliance binding North American and European countries in mutual defense of their borders and economic systems. Tanks and troops did not initiate the standoff in Europe. The permanent division of the continent began with the introduction of paper money.